Good morning. Being 10 a.m., I'll call to order the McHenry County Board Special Budget Meeting of September 28th, 2023. Kathy, could you call the roll, please?
Carolyn Campbell. Here. Joseph Gottemoller. Terry Greeno. Here. Eric Hendricks.
Present.
Carl Kaminsky.
Present.
James Kearns. Matthew Kunkel.
Here.
Teresa Meshes.
Here.
Lou Ness.
Here.
John Reinhardt. Brian Sager.
Here.
Michael Shorten.
Here.
Michael Scala.
Present.
Larry Smith.
Here.
Gloria Van Hoff.
Present.
Tracy Von Bergen.
Here.
Kelly Wegner.
Here.
Jim Kearns.
Here.
Chairman Bueller.
Here.
John Reinhardt.
Here.
Having a quorum, I'll entertain a motion to allow Mr. Kunkel to attend remotely. Ms. Meshes, seconded by Mr. Sager. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against, motion carries. Ms. Meshes will lead us in the pledge today.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll start out with public comment today. Just a reminder that any person wishing to address the board shall be provided 3 minutes to speak. If the red light comes on in front of me here, you will be asked to please summarize your comments so that we can move on to the next speaker in a timely fashion. And also, given the amount of public comment, I would ask that if a point you intended to speak about has already been brought up by another speaker, to please consider adjusting your comments. First to speak will be Gary Bevels.
Good morning. I'm Gary Bevels. I'm the Senior VP of Health Operations for Aunt Martha's Health and Wellness. Aunt Martha's is a provider in McHenry County, and we are advocating that you approve the $2.5 million increase. In addition, devise a funding plan to incrementally increase allocations to ensure level funding for current programs while ensuring new programs can be funded to fill community gaps. As one of the newer providers in the county, having a location in Woodstock, we are a prime example where funding for new programs to meet a need increased access. In 2016, we started a conversation with the hospital. That partnership was looking at how we could meet the mental health needs of the county, but it was the 708 board, the leadership, and their desire to fund new programs that brought us into the community. And because of that collaboration, just in last year, in 22, we provided 5,446 unique patients for over 13,000 patient visits. 4,600 patients received medical care, in addition to 1,259 receiving behavioral health services. The impact, if funds are not granted, will result in many providers like Aunt Martha's who will have to reduce care, creating barriers to patients with critical needs. So I want to say thank you for your time, and please fund the request.
Next speaker will be Erica Tapia, followed by Christine Nerson.
Hi, my name is Erica Tapia. I am the Behavioral Health Outpatient Program Manager at Association for Individual Development, aka AID, here in McHenry County. AID receives grant funding from the Mental Health Board and strongly supports the ask for the consideration of the sizable increase in the Mental Health Board's budget this next fiscal year. Over the years, the Mental Health Board's funding has not only allowed AID to provide services to those who are uninsured and underinsured, but assist in bridging the barrier of our limited public transportation options in our county by providing us the means to assist clients with gas cards Uber or Lyft rides through Kaizen, and fare assistance. This has assisted in ensuring the clients can get their health appointments, job interviews, work, etc. The Mental Health Board connects so many local agencies and strongly supports collaborations and partnerships. So many of us have been, so many of us have been working for several years in partnerships or even new partnerships to assist any individuals that comes through our doors in the best way we can, if our services alone do not cover their needs. AID is currently working to partner with the Illinois Migrant Council in Crystal Lake with the help of Leo and the Mental Health Board to assist in developing a support group for their staff who are working in the front lines of the migrant crisis in Chicago. There are a lot of major world and local events impacting us and the individuals in our county at large. The increase in the cost of living and employment struggles for individuals in our county have shown an increase in the need for assistance with transportation. AID has had to request additional funding from the Mental Health Board to continue assisting the increased need our clients are experiencing, which we have never had to do before. The aftermath of the pandemic has also become evident in the past year as AID and our county has seen an increase in those struggling with symptoms of anxiety and depression, substance use, and even suicidal ideations or suicide deaths. Some of those being especially prominent with our youth. In the last year, AID has observed a significant increase in the need for the child and adolescent services. We have had to start wait lists to all our programs, and we have had the longest wait times we've ever had for individuals in need of the services, with the longest wait list currently being for the children who are in need of our county. You will likely hear most of our other local agencies are in a similar or even worse situation at this time. I understand the importance and need of the additional funding for all other county boards and that there is never enough money to cover all of our realistic needs. I hope all of this also continues to be an understanding in the importance of the availability of mental
Summarize your comments, please.
Okay. And our mental health services to all individuals in our county. We all have mental health, and we are currently not equipped to address the current needs of those members in our county. Thank you.
Christine Nerson, followed by Bobby Gattoni.
Good morning. My name's Christine Grierson, and I am the Intake and Compliance Coordinator for New Directions Addiction Recovery Services. I'm coming to you today to advocate for an increase in Mental Health Board funding. As a partner with the Mental Health Board, we would not be able to operate meeting the needs of the citizens that we meet. We have 56 beds across McHenry County, which handle an adult population of substance use abuse. With our program, we work hard to get them back on track, gainfully employed, budgeting, and transitioning into a sober life where they are productive in our communities. We struggle deeply with transportation. We're hardly meeting the needs of this community, and we can see that when we walk outside. Everybody here can walk outside, walk into the square. We can see the issues with people who are not getting the services we need. We can see it in our families. We can see it in our kids, our nieces and nephews. So we need to address that. McHenry County is amazing. The Mental Health Board is a hallmark for other counties around here, but we're still not meeting the need. And so I just ask you to reconsider, walk outside, see these human beings that need help. Thank you.
Bobby Gattoni, followed by Mark Avalar.
Good morning. My name is Bob Gattone. I'm the Executive Director at New Directions Addiction Recovery Services. As Christine put so well, we serve the community in substance use disorders, and we've been doing that at a high level for the past 6 years through providing sober living opportunities for fellowship, family support, and also running the McHenry County A Way Out program through the state's attorney's office. I can tell you that, so we formed this nonprofit 11 years ago with very ambitious hopes to stop having to go to these funerals for the young people around us that were overdosing, to help give the support that the community was not giving at that time. There was almost no sober living available, no treatment, no detox, none of that in this community. It's only because of the funding level of the mental health board 6 years ago that was able to give us a leg up to formalize our nonprofit and actually start making a real impact in the community, opening sober homes, eventually enabling us to take over the McHenry County Way Out program. Because of the funding through the mental health board, we were able to take the Way Out program from the state's attorney's office from one part-time staff member that was helping essentially one person at a time, to now a program that is robust, has a bilingual staff, has 5 people on staff. We help over 600 people a year now through that program, and there's still more of a demand than we can meet. Because now that people know that service is available, we see how much it's needed in the community. I can tell you that you look at the demographic in our sober living homes and the people who call the Way Out program, substance use disorders, overdoses affect everyone equally. We have people in their 60s, people that are 19, people that are driving BMWs, and attorneys, people that are struggling and coming from homelessness, Republicans, Democrats, affected equally. I go to funerals almost weekly, unfortunately, because of the overdose issue with young people in the community. I can tell you it does not go along party lines. So I ask you to please consider an increase for the mental health board. I can tell you that if we came to the mental health board with the state of their funding right now, 6 years ago, they would not have been able to fund our program and we would not be here today. So I ask you to please not politicize this issue and do what's best for the community. Thank you.
Mark Avalar, followed by Carrie Friend.
Good morning. I am Mark Avalar. I'm resident of Algonquin, Illinois. I also have the honor to serve as the president of the Dundee Township Mental Health Board. I am not here in coordination with any of the other speakers, though what they have to say is important. This is something that I've already begun conversations with and trying to help to present a potential option and a potential solution to address the mental health funding, which is available to you as a county by statute. I have been in communication with your county board liaison, Ms. Schofield, about this, so this is not the first time that I've surfaced this to McHenry County through official channels. Maybe now is the time for the mental health board to shift its funding source from the property tax to the sales tax. Maybe now is the time to do this. The Winnebago County Mental Health Board, when it was established, funded all of its revenues through the sales tax under what's known as the Occupation Special Use Tax, or for statutory reference, 55/5/5-1006.5. What that would mean is what Winnebago did was they placed a 0.5% rate to the voters in March of 2020, and it was approved. It was all done bipartisan, and it was approved by a great number. So Winnebago County funds its mental health board through the sales tax, so they don't do it through the property tax. And I recognize and respect that the McHenry County Board, we're just a startup board in Dundee. We just funded our first agency this month because we're a startup, but you guys aren't. Yet maybe the time to shift the revenues from property and take the burden off the property tax owners and to enhance it through the sales tax is a potential solution, which I hope all of y'all will consider, and I'll be surprised if the county administration is not going to propose this in their presentation. I haven't seen it. Yet, though, it's possible. And I just had this conversation with Will County, who, when they passed their mental health referendum, they surpassed McHenry County as the largest 708 mental health board. But this is something you could phase in, pass the referendum in March, if the voters go with you, and implement the revenue source in July. That's how the law works. If you wait till November, you won't be able to implement until July of 2025. So time is of the essence. Now is the time to make these decisions, and hopefully a discussion and a dialogue can begin today. And certainly Ms. Schofield, through her official role, she already has the statutory references and some more details, and I'll be communicating with her because this is a good idea. Let's take a best of best approach, just as Winnebago led the way. Thank you very much.
Carrie Friend, followed by Catherine Becker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Friend. I'm the Director of Homeless Services for Pioneer Center. I have been working at Pioneer for over 21 years now. I just celebrated my 21st anniversary, and I'm going to get to why that's important. But Pioneer Center serves 3 different pillars. We serve the homeless, we serve IDD clients, and we also have a behavioral health program. Numerous programs under all of those pillars. The reason I brought up that I've been with Pioneer for 21 years is because for that long, if it weren't for the Mental Health Board, they've been funding different things at Pioneer for as long as I've been at Pioneer. And I can't stress to you how important it is that they continue to be able to fund not just Pioneer Center, but all the other agencies, because over that time that I've worked here, I've worked with every single agency sitting out in the audience, and I can't stress, they're all important. And there are a lot of gaps in this community, and we need to be able to keep those agencies going, because there's going to be more gaps if we don't. Thank you for your time.
Catherine Becker, followed by Mike Baber.
Hello, I'm Catherine Becker, resident of McHenry County, District 4. And I would just like to ask you to support the increase for the budget for the mental health department of McHenry County. Thank you.
Mike Baber, followed by Suzanne Hoban.
Good morning. My name's Dr. Mike Baber. I'm on the McHenry County Mental Health Board. You know, as this plays out, I can't help but look at you guys. I know most of you. I grew up with Jim Kearns. What I really want to do, about 5 years ago, under a different administration, there was a need for $500,000 to come back to this board, and it was legitimate, and I supported that because it made sense. Now the situation is on the other foot, and really I want to propose a rhetorical question. I don't expect you to answer. If putting in our budget, because we've been flat for over about 5 years. We've been a flat budget, so that doesn't take in salary increases or anything else. So my question is a very simple one. What is a better way for both of our teams to work together and to be able to ask for what we need without it becoming adversarial? Because we are on the same team. I know how hard you guys work. I know what I do on the mental health board, and we're part of the most concerned citizens, as you are. We're out there doing what not everybody's willing to do. So, you know, it's a shame when it looks as though and feels as though we're on opposite sides. We're on the same side. I'm grateful for everything you've done during my entire time of being on the board. There's got to be a better way for us to communicate, whether that's a committee that's built, I don't know. But Jim Kearns reached out to me, we talked, and it was hugely helpful. So that's it. Thank you.
Just briefly, I'll entertain a motion to allow Mr. Gottemoller to attend remotely. Ms. Altoff, or seconded by Ms. Meshes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Against, motion carries. Suzanne Hoban, followed by Mary Marr.
Good morning. I'm Suzanne Hoban. I'm the Executive Director for the Family Health Partnership Clinic. We serve the uninsured in primary care and some mental health services in the county. We don't get a lot of government funding, in fact, almost none, but we do get money from the Mental Health Board. In March this year, we had to go back to the Mental Health Board to ask for more money because we had almost spent all of our therapy money by then. So let me say that again. In 4 months, we went through a year's worth of funding for therapy services. Now, I'm sure your first inclination is going to be, well, you should learn to manage your money better. But I'm going to tell you that what I was forced to do was to start triaging people. Who gets the care if I run out of money? Is it the woman with cancer who's despondent over her potential death and how she's going to take care of her children? Is it the guy in Harvard who has had several suicide attempts and is now slipping back into depression? Is it the young woman with PTSD who saw her father killed by the gangs? Who gets the services? This is something that we and all of my incredible colleagues out there have to face when our funding isn't enough. A couple years ago, the big medical boogeyman was rationed care. Well, guess what? We are already rationing care. And it is on the most ridiculous reason possible. Those who can't afford it don't get care. If you want to improve services for McHenry County, you want to reduce crimes, you want to reduce suicides, you want to reduce substance abuse, you need to fund mental health services at its fullest capacity. Don't make us ration care.
Mary Mall, or Mar, it's hard to read here, followed by Carolyn Schofield.
Hi, thank you to the past few dynamic speakers. My name is Mary Mock. Now I am substitute teaching in McHenry. Our son was a smart musician. I'll put a personal face on this. 20 years ago, he came down with mental illness, severe mental illness. Do I feel anyone cares in McHenry County? Absolutely not. I cared about my students, and I still do. He is not a criminal. He is a smart musician. He always was smart. Okay? Well, when he became mentally ill, pardon me, his psychiatrist, Dr. Vidak, said there's no place for him to go. He told us a few months ago the same thing. There's no place for him to go. So he has been home with us for 20 years because we love him. We are now 70. And that is not getting easier for my husband or I. I don't think the county board realizes the sad and disappointing feeling I have about this county, as I'm a Packer, and I will always be a Packer. We hear, take him to Missouri, take him to Florida. Well, we've been here, my husband, for 72 years, and we don't want to leave here. We're hoping we'll get some help. I don't mean to say it's pathetic. I'll say disappointing and sad. The only person we have had any kind and caring attention from is Dr. Mike Baber, who just talked. He has hope for Nick. I haven't heard the word hope in 20 years because he is capable. You people are lucky if you have no child like this. You don't know the pain. And you don't know the pain of reaching out, trying to find and having to belittle myself and come here and beg. Dr. Mike said there might be a program now in December. It was 6 months ago since he gave me some hope. Maybe the program won't be there. I'm certainly not holding my breath because he is capable of so much more. Please provide the services for young adults. How many times has he talked to me about committing suicide? I can't even count anymore. He has been in 5 mental health institutions, mental health units of hospitals. Has he ever come back better? Never. If anything, he comes back worse. We should be ashamed of McHenry County and what they offer to people who have depression, mental illness, stress-related, just what the last woman talked about.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
That is it. Thank you for listening.
Carolyn Schofield.
Good morning. Carolyn Schofield, and I warned you guys that I would be back, so here I am. And I first wanted to thank you for my recent appointment to the Mental Health Board as the County Board Liaison. This has been something very near and dear to me, even when I was on the County Board. Took a great interest in it, so I really appreciate that appointment. And I realize I am jumping into this at the 11th hour, but I think this is an opportunity to bring a fresh perspective on both the needs of mental health and the reality of the limitations the county board is facing. On a regular basis, I hear the need for mental health services, not only in McHenry County, in surrounding counties and throughout the state. I would like to start by saying McHenry County residents and the county board have been strong advocates for mental health services and investing in the needs of our communities. We are one of the few counties that actually has a mental health board and prioritizes its services. Regardless of how the budget ends up, we can all agree that there will never be enough money toward mental health, and not only in McHenry County, but throughout the state and throughout our country. As the liaison, I understand that we need to find balance, a balance of where we are today, how we want to evolve, and how we accomplish this within the confines of the county budget process. I have been in your shoes. I know the history of budget cuts and the effects it has on all departments. While I stand here today asking you to continue to support the continued support for mental health services, I am not going to ask for a cut to any of the other critical services that McHenry County provides. Things like senior services, veterans assistance, workforce development, transportation, public health, and so on. My ask is this: please consider the impact of investing in mental health. Investing in services to address substance abuse, suicide, recidivism rates, etc., and the impact it can have. It is an investment with a return tenfold to other areas within the budget. Finally, I will address the mental health board elephant in this room, a $2.5 million increase in the mental health board budget. Well, and this would maximize the levying percentage that Mr. Avalar spoke about earlier. Please do not get caught up in this ask. I will agree this is not a realistic ask, as again, I would not want to jeopardize other valuable services. We have reviewed next year's funding applications at the Mental Health Board, and while we could utilize the entire $2.5 million, in reality, great work can still be done and additional services can be provided to the most in need if we can receive a minimum increase of $500,000, or slightly even more if you find it, to the Mental Health Board budget. Please consider the good work that has been done in this county and invest in the continuation of being a premier mental health advocate in the state. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment today. Are there any member comments this morning? Am I working here? Okay, seeing no member comments, we will move on to our new business and the fiscal year 24 budget development and options. And just briefly, I would like to thank Finance Committee Chair Scala, the Finance Committee, and all of our committees, Pete Austin, our County Administrator, Carrie Wise in the Finance Department, as well as all department heads who work together in a collaborative way to address the very real challenges for our upcoming budget. So, thank you very much.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, Chairman Bueller.
I was going to do the first part. Oh. But you're going to jump right in. Okay. We don't want this to appear rehearsed, so we didn't rehearse. Anyway, I wanted to say thanks for everybody being here also. This is the third year that we've had a special committee, the whole meeting, just to look at the budget development process, and I like it. I like devoting this time to this. So I wanted to thank Carrie. This is the first year in her new role as CFO, and it's gone really well. So you should be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you. This is like the 7th year or so that she's done the whole county budget, but this is the first year in her seat. So we're proud of her doing that. You know, our McHenry County organization has a pretty long history of a relatively smooth budget process, and I think we're going to feel that again. It's going pretty well. You know, the bottom line is we have a history of budgeting pretty fiscally conservative, and that's served us well year over year. More often than not, we're finishing year a little bit in the black instead of a little bit in the red. But the real anchor on that is trust, and it's these department heads and elected officials aren't asking for more than they need, but we're trusting them to just give us what you need. But at the same time, they're trusting you that, you know, if things come up, that we're going to be there for them and step in and fill in the blank. You know, we had a committee meeting this week where court services needed to come back and ask for a little bit more money for juvenile detention. They had budgeted as we asked, very conservatively. They give us a 5-year average of what their costs were, and that was the budget number. It was a bigger year. There was more work to be done this year, so we had to make an adjustment. But that trust is why it works. If everybody asks for the rainy day fund, if everybody asks for the worst case scenario, the budget never works. But these guys trust us that we're going to be reasonable. But if we run into hiccups come October, we're gonna step in there. So that was my main point. Now I will turn it over to you, Carrie, and we'll get started. We got a good show today.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. First thing we're going to go through is where we're at right now with the 2024 budget. Then we're going to talk about some challenges. Then we'll get into the scenarios. So the first.
I want to go back on that. I want to make one comment on ARPA. See, again, we're not rehearsed. ARPA has been a tool. It's not a challenge. It's been a tool. But the thing is that we have to remember is it's not going to be there forever. You know, those federal dollars we're trying to direct them to one-time expenses, but there are a few instances where they have been folded into our operating budget, and that's what we want to keep in mind. That is the challenge. We can't deceive ourselves that those dollars are going to be there forever. That was kind of the point you were going to make, right, Carrie?
Yes. Okay, so you will see this particular worksheet throughout our presentation. We use this at staff to determine the maximum we can levy, how we can spread it to the different levies. And so why am I starting with this? Is because on the next slide, we're going to talk about revenues. And so I wanted to show you, so it's not really a focus, you're going to see the 75 million as where we are right now as a starting point, because we can't talk about scenarios and where we want to end up until we have some kind of starting point. So the amounts we have listed for the levies is what was discussed at committee and what was put forward.
Essentially what everybody asked for.
Yes, so it's part of our process.
We didn't make any decisions about what was right or wrong. We just put in what everybody asked for, and this is how it works out.
And so where we're at right now is the revenue by category. So you can see what I just talked about, the 75 million is the tax, what we have from the committee, the property tax. But really what I want you guys to focus on for these next couple of slides are the, not necessarily the property tax, but some of our other revenues. So the other taxes, the increase in that is from the MFT option that was just passed a few weeks ago. Increase in our cannabis revenue and our income tax, state income tax. But the rest of them you can see are relatively flat. So this next graph is just, I know some people like to see things in graph form, but it's really just the revenue laid out, so you can see the dependence on property tax and other tax. Next is the same by expenditures. And what I want to point out on here is the contractual services. We're going to talk a little bit more about it as we get into some of our challenges or solutions. But again, everything else in the capital in 2023 is from highway. So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily going down. It's more that 23 was very high.
And that was related to the Randall Road project?
Yes. They budget they obligate everything in 1 year, and then they spend it down over the term of the project. Okay, and then the same. Any questions so far on?
No, they're not doing that, remember?
Oh, sorry. Well, I didn't announce it at the beginning. Okay, so I guess where we're at, and now we move into.
I'm gonna do this.
Okay.
All right, thanks. Give you a break. So this slide, we took from the court service, or the court administration budget presentation. So Dan Wallace gets the credit for this. And it kind of speaks for itself. You know, the Safety Act and all the related criminal justice reform is coming with a cost. And the counties weren't consulted on how this is going to unfold, but we're ready. We were ready on January 1. There was a stay on that, and it was put into place on September 18th, and we were ready then. And there are elements, and that's just the pretrial fairness component that went into place on September 18th, but other elements we're working on. But it's not without cost. We have added several new staff. I'll show that in a moment. Judge Camille has done a fantastic job. Judge Cowan before him, getting us ready, getting all of the court services ready, all the state attorneys ready. But it did come with a cost. Is there anything you want to say on this slide, or can I kind of answer? Okay. All right. This way. And here is some of those costs. These are known impacts. These were very easy to quantify. The new staff members that came to helping us respond to all elements of safety. It's not all about pretrial fairness, but it is all elements about safety. There are other challenges that are related to this that are harder to quantify, and we're going to have to wait and see and play this out. I know that Judge Camille and the courthouse team will be, again, they're going to be gathering next week with all the law enforcement to see how pretrial fairness is going. But we're going to be gathering again, in 4 months or 3 months, and just seeing, with these new tools in place, this new staff in place, how is it working? Are there areas where we're going to see some savings? Perhaps. We don't know yet, but we know that there's definite revenue loss on the bond front, and we know that there's new expenses related to electronic monitoring and all the staff there. So, anyways, this is one of the challenges that we've been dealt, and we are responding, and I think we're doing it in a pretty good way. All right. You go.
I guess I just want to make one comment. It's important to note, as Pete said, that this is what we know, and we try to be very aware of adding concrete numbers. So, if someone says, well, how much is safety costing the county? It's not 1.9. We don't know what it could be, but again, it's back to the open communication and making sure that we react to things as they come up.
And that's why it's so important to have some capacity to respond 4 months from now, when we really find out where this is going and what's the true cost. So we can't be so lean that we don't have the ability to respond come next January.
Yes. So the next challenge, which we've been talking about for the past couple years, is inflation. And one thing we did differently in this year's budget, which I know we talked a lot about at committees, is instead of having departments just budget for their maintenance budget with no increases and then adding everything as a supplemental, our message to them is if it's what you have been doing, there's nothing new, it's just costing you more, we wanted them to just build that into their budget. But per the budget policy, we have to kind of show where the budget is growing. And so what is in the first few slides that I showed you where we're starting is an additional 838,000 just from costs of what we were already doing last year. And so in previous years, we kind of saw it more in the commodities, fuel, utilities. Now we're seeing it shift. The commodities are coming down, but the contractual services are going up. The services, the software.
This $800,000 would have shown up on this sheet in past years.
Correct.
But Mike kind of directed us, and the Finance Committee agreed, if it's just the same service, it just costs more, just build it in.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, you have to note that it's a lot of the things shifting from commodities to contractuals are because of the wages going up, which unfortunately will probably go up and stay up. Okay, so the next one Pete touched on briefly is, this is what is currently being funded by ARPA, that is not, ARPA on the county side, that is not considered like a one-time purchase. So it's, I guess, just to keep at the back of your head when we're developing the 2027 budget, that we'll have to have a discussion on this $2 million and, you know, how we're gonna move forward with it.
Well, I just wanna, so this is something that we talked about at Finance Committee, and it's, I don't want the board to get into a false sense that we don't have reoccurring expenses that are being paid by ARPA. And I wanted to point out that this truly is that scenario. So we have $2 million of reoccurring expenses that we're ultimately going to have to put into our budget once ARPA ends. And my recommendation isn't to take $2 million and dump it in 1 year, because that, you know, that's gonna become a problem for us. So to me, the recommendation is that we slowly start to put this stuff back into our budget and try and utilize ARPA for one-time expenses and not reoccurring. And so, but we wanted to lay this out for you so you understand not only the totality of the dollar amount, but where that dollar amount is currently being spent. So it's not something that we can just avoid for 2 years. It's something we have to start addressing now and in the next couple of budgets, so that we're not having to deal with $2+ million in 2 years, because that's not financially wise or healthy for the county.
And these are must-haves, right? I mean,
Nearly
look at
all.
the public safety video, I mean, that's related to safety
Right.
and data storage for body cams and Microsoft Enterprise. If we can't get around having that.
Correct. True statement.
Oh, this is my slide. Kathy found a cool graphic on this one, so I had a vision of what I wanted to say. So, in what we aren't talking about today, and is our 5-year capital plan. We've really strengthened and doing a better job of modeling what we're going to need for capital over the next 5 years. Adam Latundra has done a good job in kind of owning this, and we're putting it into software. But we have $4 million of capital needs next year that we are going to account for without the operating budget. You know, we're using a combination of our strong fund reserves and the Scala plan that we developed a few years ago. When we finished paying debt on this building, this was a 20-year debt that we paid off a little early. When we finished paying that debt off, we kept that debt chunk, which was 1.5 or 1.7 million, and just kept that moving forward as putting it to the capital program. So the combination of dollars from our former debt and our strong fund reserves, we're able to fund next year's capital plan without any dollars, you know, that is competing with the operating budget. So that's a good thing. But we have to balance that a little bit also. And this is the point I'm trying to make. We can't, and this is the point Mike's made, we can't use our reserves on ongoing projects. You know, we have a strong reserve, but we need to use we have that general rule of if it's an ongoing project, we want to tie it to an ongoing revenue. If it's a one-time project, then we can use the reserves. So that's the the gist I'm trying to make it, and I'm going to come back to that point a little bit. But we have to understand when when we are using reserves for one-time projects and when we're using ongoing revenue to fund ongoing projects. I'll make my point clear. I think so. All right. Oh, this one's mine too. All right. Now your paper copy doesn't say levy history. It has a typo in there. We call it fund balances. But I asked for this slide to be put in. I'm proud of this slide. I really am. If you look here, our levy in the year that we're sitting in was $71.5 million. Compare that to 10 years ago, it was $78.5 million. We brought it down. We found other ways to do things. We've reduced headcount. We've had a decade of hardly any inflation. Now we know that inflation's jumped on us in the last 2 years, 18 months. But for the past decade, we were able to get by with very little inflation, and that helped us. We had strong fund balances for the last decade, and we've used those fund balances to help, keep our levy low. We're in good shape with our levy from where we were a decade ago. I guess I want everyone to understand we've done our part, to get to this point. I know that there is a desire to do more belt tightening and look under every rock, and we continue to do that. This staff is amazing in what they're doing, but we've taken so many steps over the last decade to get us to this point that allowing yourself some growth on the levy is in fact, I think, somewhat responsible because where we know where we're going. Okay, next slide. The supplementals. These are on your desk here. Again, your department heads and elected officials were very modest in what they asked for. We trust them to do so, and they've done that. We only have about 881,000 in general fund supplementals that we're recommending right now. We saw a lot of need in IT. We're adding a couple positions in IT. We need some redundancy in IT, and especially in terms of elections. So we'd like to put some additional IT staff there. We need some redundancy in leadership in IT. So we're going to put another person there, or at least recommend to do so. But Tom asked for more. He asked for more IT positions in that. But we're going to settle with 2 right now and see how things go. He trusts us. We trust him. When we get into the middle part of next year, we'll see how his staffing level is going, and we maybe can revisit that. But everything else, the general fund requests were so modest and so straightforward. I'm comfortable recommending that group to you. The special funds, they don't compete with anything. The Valley High funds, the DOT funds. I want to acknowledge that the DOT personnel moves that are recommended on there, we maybe should have left those off. We haven't reviewed those with Cheryl. She's been out in South America, but I will leave those on as a placeholder because we do need to make some additional moves in personnel at DOT, but it won't be reflected by what you see on your sheet there. We'll probably come back and visit with TC at the end of October, thereabouts, but Cheryl and Joe and I need to talk on that a little bit more. Anything else we need to talk about on this page?
Well, one thing is, when you're looking back and looking at this versus what we presented on this third slide, I think, with expenses, the general fund capital is included in those numbers using the reserves. The supplementals are not included in those numbers, as we just have them as a recommendation now for your review.
Okay, now we get to the meat and potatoes. This was our request. These were all our levy requests. If you look there at the top, you see the maximum new property tax that this county can generate is about 4.4 million. That's new growth and the allowable 5% with CPI. That would generate about 4.4 million. You walk down that list, and we've talked about we need to strengthen our tort fund and risk management. And Scott has done a good job of modeling what we need to put there. And the comfortable number would be another $750,000. The Veterans Affairs Commission, they don't have to ask us anymore for their levy, but they've been pretty modest and only asking for another $110,000. We appreciate that, and I would like to do that for them as they're serving our vets. Senior Services is another levy that's been flat since the inception of the levy, and we need to do more there. We're proposing to make that an even $2 million. So but to do that, we got to add $355,000. The Highway Fund. When we went to CC and we looked at their capital plan, we were at a $9 million levy. The suggestion was to move to a $10.2 million levy. Mental Health Fund, Mental Health Board, we've talked about that a lot. This is the $2.5 million. And the General Fund, as we looked at our supplementals and the things that we wanted to do, we were proposing that we needed about an additional $800,000. You see that adds up to $5.7 million, and that's more than we can do. That was the request. That was kind of where we started. So I want to move to the next slide and talk about where we see a recommendation coming in. Risk management, and Scott and his model, I think we can probably do something closer to $500,000 and keep our fingers crossed. I'm not going to mess with the VAC. Senior Services, they need the dollars there. The Highway Fund, with county option motor fuel tax, we don't need additional property tax there. So that frees up $1.2 million there. And that was a game changer. I mean, this would be a different meeting, but for your decision to give the financial tool that the county option motor fuel tax brings. Mental health, the suggestion is at $500,000 or $525,000. It's a big increase, and you know that I think seems fair right now, but you guys are the policymakers there. And the general fund, we're reducing that a little bit to get down to $700,000. What the end game here is, you know, it shows about exactly half of the new property tax that we could take, $2.2 million. It's not what everybody wants. I mean, no one wants to increase property tax, but I do think we have to begin to increase that levy in anticipation of fiscal year 27 when our federal support goes away. And it does get new money to some of the critical areas that we need, like mental health and senior services. Any comments on that? Okay. All right. I'm going to let you do the next couple then. We had our budget policy asking for scenarios. Budget policy asked for 3 scenarios. We did 5.
The budget policy asked for 4,
Okay.
and then there was a request from Finance and Audit for a 5th. So the first scenario shows a 3% reduction from last year's levy.
So so this was something that came out of finance, so I'll speak to this a little bit. There were some committee members that wanted to see what would happen if we reduced the levy by 3%, and that was, the 3% was, I don't want to say arbitrary, but it was the number that finance used. So with any time that we've done a reduction, for those new board members that weren't part of that when we did that several years ago, because that's all policy decision making, basically how that gets handled is we ask staff to come up with a list of recommendations. So if we're decreasing it by 2.2 million, we would ask staff to come up with, you know, roughly 5 to 6 million worth of cuts. And then as the policymakers, the board makes a decision about where those cuts are going to be made and direct staff to do that. So if that's a scenario that the board wants to entertain, then we will have a series of a bunch of more cows to try and go through that process and figure out where all those cuts are going to be made and what programs will get not funded or what programs will be cut. So that's not on staff, that's on the board to do that as the policymakers. So if that's of interest for a majority of the board, that would be 10 of you, then we can go down that road and have a bunch of special meetings to get that accomplished.
So the first scenario from the budget policy is to keep it status quo, same as last year. And so how we have that set up here is just a shift from the general fund to VAC, everything else staying as is. The next one is new growth only. And next year's estimate for new growth is strong. So you can see that we just funded the risk, VAC, and then tort.
You give a little
Yeah.
mental health.
And then tort, and then the remaining amount to mental health.
And this is just FYI, so we work closely with Bob Ross to get these numbers. So these are Bob's estimates as of about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So these are as current as we can potentially get them based on what Bob starts getting in from the different townships as far as new growth goes. So again, this might fluctuate a little bit, but for the most part, it's our best estimate that we have based on what Bob can accumulate.
So the next scenario is new growth plus 2.5% of the max of 5% of the CPI. And this is, I guess, slightly more than our recommendation, but we just wanted to show you some of the options with 2.5. And then last is the maximum amount that we can take. As Pete mentioned, it's the 4.4 million with 5% CPI plus the new growth. Okay, and the last one is the recommendation that Pete mentioned before with the slide that showed the levies. Turns out to be 1.95% CPI plus new growth would accomplish the money needed for the levies that we mentioned before.
I was gonna have Mike do that slide, but.
This one, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Hey, whatever, that's fine. And then this is about it. I mean, I feel like this feels right in many respects. There is capacity to do a little bit more if that's the pleasure of the board. But in that model of getting just what we need to our departments and our offices, this accomplishes it, and it kind of hits that target of not maximizing the property tax levy.
Well, so I think so staff comes up with this recommendation to the board. And so let's talk a little bit about process and then kind of where things are at right now. So process oriented, this recommendation will come to finance next week. And as a finance committee, we will spend time reviewing not only the recommendation, but then also the different scenarios. And at finance committee, I highly recommend anyone that is interested to please come to the finance meeting. As you know, I always have an open meeting where, all board members can participate. And so at that meeting, it's critical that what comes out of that meeting is then forwarded to the full board at the committee of the whole. And at that committee of the whole, that's where I would hope that we would have a healthy discussion about what finance is recommending, whatever those numbers end up being. Ultimately, what I'm trying to achieve is for a majority of the board, 10 board members, to agree with something. Whatever that something is, that will then be taken to the full board, the board meeting, and then that's what gets put on at that October meeting, gets put on 30-day review, okay? My expectation is that what gets put on 30-day review, plus or minus a couple of little tweaks like we always have when we get refinement of numbers, that's ultimately what the board would pass. I have heard from board members for the last umpteen years that they are disappointed in the board because in November, people try and make amendments, people try and make changes, people try and do things on the board floor the night that we're passing the budget. And it becomes a very frustrating meeting for everybody. And so after talking with the chairman, we would really like to try and resolve all that through finance and through the next committee of the whole, and then ultimately the board meeting in October. And again, I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm saying that process-wise, that is a much healthier process. My concern is that when we put something on 30-day review, the purpose of that is really for the public to be able to analyze and say, hey, do we agree with this or we don't agree with it? And for the board then to take action after it and say, well, we don't really care what the public said. We don't really care what the process was. We're going to try and modify it at that point in time. That is counterintuitive to what a healthy governing body does. And so if you have strong feelings about something should be higher or lower, please express that now. Please express that at finance. Please express it at the committee of the whole if you don't want to come to finance. Because to me, those are all very healthy discussions that we should be having and trying to put into place. Ultimately, I feel as staff, their recommendation is their job of trying to understand where they feel a majority of the board can support. Because that's ultimately, with an ordinance, we need 10 votes in the affirmative for something. And so staff is making a recommendation based on what they believe will happen. But, you know, ultimately, if there's 10 board members that feel that one number should go up or down, then that's what we should do. The problem that I see in this whole mechanism is that if 10 board members really want, I'm just going to pick on mental health board because that's probably the elephant in the room as to what that number is, right? So I'm going to confront it. So if 10 board members don't like 525,000 and they really want, you know, pick a number, 600,000, that's great. But if that means that I lose other people on other areas, then I still got to come up with 10 votes. So, you know, my job as chairman is I feel, to try and get a majority of the board to support something and provide as much information, answer questions, whatever I need to do with the help of staff to get 10 people to vote some certain way. And to me, that's the healthy part of, you know, we have 18 elected officials representing different people from different backgrounds and ultimately to pass a budget that the county can use to go forward. So when we look at this recommendation, it's just that, it's a recommendation. And the board now is responsible for trying to come up with what you feel is a better, or you're okay with this, or whatever scenario it is. When chairman and myself and Pete and Carrie were meeting, you know, we looked at this and I asked Mike, I said, can you support this? And he said, yes. I said, I can support this. But ultimately, if there's numbers to be changed, then there needs to be 10 people that are willing to change those numbers, either up or down. That's just simple math of what we got going on. Right. So, go ahead.
For those who ask me, when in the process do we speak up and try to make these changes, it is the Finance Committee meeting next week. We should, when we come to the cow next month, we should be 99.9% there, right? And to do it on the evening of the vote is just, I think it's unfair to the process. It's unfair to staff to try to juggle those numbers that night and make those changes unexpectedly. We need to be there next week and worst case at the cow. Simple as that.
So now we're opening up to questions.
I do have a question. If you could just tell me what, under the ARPA, what do some of those things, what is simulate and?
You're talking about the 2 million?
Yeah.
No, it says county projects.
No, you're talking about the 2 million total, right? Of
I'm talking about county projects
So the
funded by
majority,
ARPA.
so the top one is the, in regards to safety for the cameras.
Okay,
And then, so the position in finance is to help manage the ARPA grant, and then the rest, so the enterprise agreement, IT.
no, I just didn't know what
IT
simulate
projects.
meant. I didn't know what it
Oh,
meant.
it's software.
Okay, it's a software,
Well,
okay.
Each one of
No.
these has already gone to Finance Committee and the board.
Yeah, I just didn't know what it meant.
Identified as an American Rescue Plan
Yeah.
project.
And what, the clinician and case manager?
That is for the special courts.
Okay, great, thank you.
My board here is not working as it usually would, so Ms. Van Hoff.
Yes, I'm looking at the slide that's titled Known Impacts of the Safety Act. And I just have a question. Are these really known yet? Because we said at the beginning that we were going to have, we were going to have to hire some additional staff. And I see we did hire some staff in the state's attorney's office, 6 full-time equivalents, 2 full-time equivalents in the public defender's office, and there's an additional cost for the circuit clerk. Are these known yet? Because when we had this discussion at the beginning, we said we may not need some of these. So
all of
you're
these are-
calling it known now. Do we know for sure that we need all of this?
Yes.
Every one of these has been approved and is in the budget.
So.
I didn't ask if it was approved. What I ask is, do we know that we need 6 full-time equivalents in the state's attorney's office, for instance?
It's been requested by the state's attorney and approved. 4 of them last year through the supplemental process, and then 2 in August through resolution. Same with public defender.
Now, your question is about need.
Yeah.
Know that we need those
But
yet?
okay, need is different than
Then
it's a known
we're-
cost.
then the
and
ask.
we know it's approved, and we know that people are hired or going to be hired for the positions. We trust our criminal justice system. We trust our court services. We trust our state's attorney, and we trust our chief judge, and we trust our public defender. And when we come together and measure how things are going 4 or 6 months from now, we're going to hear.
Okay.
The state's attorney's office hasn't always been the same size. It has expanded and contracted, and Patrick Keneally did bring staffing levels down for a number of years, and he has grown it modestly now in response. But need is hard to measure.
Okay, let me just say, this is not a matter of trust. At the beginning, we said, this is what our anticipated need is. It may be that we find out that we don't need that many. So are we still in that stage where we don't know, or?
Well, I think, okay, there's 2 sides of this. I'm looking at the financial side of it, which is what we're talking about with the budget. The financial side is, it's a known commodity because it's already, people are hired, money's being spent. So when you look at this almost $2 million, that's known dollars out the window. What you're talking about is the actual use of people, and do we actually need that many people to implement the Safety Act? And that I don't think any one of us in this room can answer right now because it just got done. And so I think that question, although it's a genuine question that needs an answer, I don't think we can answer that until the program is actually going on and we see how it's working and how much time is needed. I mean, that's something that Pam's committee can deal with in, whatever, 2-3 months and take a look at it and say, okay, this is, we have the right number of people or we don't have the right number of people. Because I don't know until we've had time to go through this that we can answer that right now. But financially speaking, which is what we're dealing with budget, yeah, that's known now because it's spent.
Because it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Althoff.
I'm going to answer, with your permission, Member Van Hoff's comment, and then I have my own. So just very clearly, Law and Government really did get excellent presentations from all of these entities. I believe it was unanimous moving those budget requests forward. I think that, again, as Mr. Scala stated, from a financial perspective, we were comfortable in what we were presented with because they were expenses that we knew were already being considered. So I just want you to know, from a committee perspective as the chairman, we were very comfortable with those numbers. And I just want to point out too, I thank you very much, Finance Committee, as well as Mr. Chairman, for the increase to senior services. Just want to point out, it's been 20 years, and it was a referendum, community referendum that passed very greatly to have monies for senior services, and we have kept that flat for 20 years. And we just had a presentation about the increase in costs and inflation. So I thank you for increasing that, because I think that money will also go to good use for an ever-increasing senior population here in McHenry. So just wanted to point that out to everybody. So thank you.
Right, and with senior services, we are looking at creating efficiencies to better utilize those dollars and reach more of the need. Mr. Sager.
Thank you, Chairman. First thing I want to do is to offer my sincere thanks and commendation to our professional staff across the board. I think you've done an absolutely remarkable job of identifying the needs that we have going forward for this county, and also for putting it in a presentation today which was easily understood and I think comprehensive. The second thing I want to say is I think we owe a deep amount of appreciation and gratitude to, frankly, previous boards and previous professionals within the county, because we have a very strong history here in McHenry County of having a good, solid financial position that has been a responsible position as we look at the people's resources, because it is the people's resources, and utilizing those resources in a very, very professional, efficient, and well-managed manner. So I want to say first that we stand on the shoulders of a lot of other people who have done incredible work, and we should be grateful for that. As we look forward to this coming year, it is always difficult as you balance needs and interests and revenue, and that's a huge challenge. You have done a good job today of pointing out the fact that there are some absolutes that we have to acknowledge are increases that we must cover. Not the least of those is the Safety Act, $1.9 million. It is there, we have to pay for it, and so we must provide for that. The second is something that we're all facing in our own households, much to our chagrin, but it is reality, and that is inflation. Inflation has moved forward rather dramatically, and so that increased our costs, and that is absolute. I also think that we have to recognize the fact that we have opportunities as we begin to look at the situation in which we find ourselves as we try to compare projected revenues with hopes for our ability to provide additional services. You know, philosophically, it's a push-pull, and it will always be a push-pull situation. The reality, though, that we have to understand is that there is never going to be a time, never, when you are in these types of elected positions having to make these difficult choices, that somebody is going to come up to the podium, go to the mic, and say, "We thank you so much. You've done an absolutely remarkable job, and so we now want you to start cutting the services." That's not going to happen. People are going to continue to look for future services, additional services, and the cost of those services for the ones that are presently provided are going to increase, and additional services will add significantly to budgets. And so we have to recognize that reality. I think all units of local government have done a remarkable job at addressing the downturn in our economic circumstances earlier on. And what we did, appropriately, I think, was to recognize that we needed to assist and to help our residents, and we did so by either reducing our property taxes, which many units of local government did, and or looking to hold those property taxes static. That was a good thing. But as we look back upon that, we recognize the fact that we weren't, therefore, always able to keep up with the increasing costs associated with inflation and the natural rise in associated demand. And so we find ourselves now having to make the tough choices. Because the fact of the matter is that there are only 3 ways that you can truly budget and fulfill the obligations. And that is that you either increase your revenues, you decrease your costs, or a combination of the 2. But I need to say very strongly, you cannot cut your way out of financial demand. You can't do it. So you have to look at a combination of proper management, and I think that this county has done a remarkable job of managing the people's resources, as I previously stated. So what's left? We must look at increase in revenues. And that is one of the hardest things for any elected individual to say publicly, that we have to increase levies to meet the demand. People don't like it, they don't want to hear it, but it is a reality. We have to increase our revenues, just like we do within our own family situations and in business situations. So I appreciate the levy that has been proposed here. Increase at new growth plus 1.95 is the recommendation that has been placed before us today. But I think we need to do more than that, and I'm going to be a proponent for that. And I'm hoping that as we get to the Finance Committee meeting that's coming up, that we will have a computer program that there's before us, that we can start plugging in figures and we can adjust what the outcomes would be. Right now, it appears to me, and I could be totally wrong, but it appears to me that a percentage, if you go to 0.5%, I think you're generating something in the neighborhood of $520,000. 0.5%, basically an increase of $520,000 in revenue, something like that. So I'm looking at a higher levy than is being proposed. I know, and I'm certain that some of my colleagues will object, but I think we have an obligation to meet the needs of the services that are expected. I support a higher amount going to mental health. I appreciate all of the thoughtful work that has gone into the other areas, and I'm very supportive of staff's recommendations in those areas. We made a tough decision most recently to go ahead and increase the fuel tax by 3.3 cents, but that did a great job of helping us to address our transportation. Now, huge priority, mental health. We must meet those obligations in the future. The future health of this community, the future health of our residents helps us in the long term to keep our costs down. We need to address those head on. I'm hoping that we recognize that we made a game changer move, as Peter said, when we made that increase to the fuel tax levy. I am sincerely hoping that we are not afraid to make the other game changer move, and that is to do what we have to do, even though it's going to be unpopular, but increase the levy to a higher level. I'm not going to suggest that level right now. I have my personal opinions, but I think we've got to fulfill the request for mental health. Thank you.
So yes, these scenarios, and the Carrie will bring her computer with the Excel spreadsheet where you just simply you want a different number, you plug it in, and you can see where it all flows out. So yes, we'll be utilizing that tool at the finance meeting to have that discussion.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to repeat what the chairman said earlier. Please, if you have any suggestions, questions, and I'm going to back it up a step, not just to the finance committee at the time, bring it to Mr. Scala is always open to call. I've been on the finance committee for 6 or 7 years. Please feel free to call me so we can get those questions to staff, have some type of analyzation to see what the consequences will be ahead of time so we can have a meaningful discussion at the finance committee. That would be very, very helpful in this whole process. Thank you.
Ms. Meshes?
Thank you. So I was just trying to
add numbers up quickly, and I wanted to acknowledge that although we're going to have an inflation cost of over close to $840,000, and we of course have our asks from all the departments, that it would appear that the maximum ask was to increase general fund only by 0.8 million. So seems to me then there is congratulations to our department staff for being able to find spots in their previous budgets, right? So that we're not increasing, the whole inflation cost is not actually an increase to our general fund. Is that true?
No, so we've had increase in other taxes that I mentioned before, like cannabis, the state income tax. Plus, we're using about I think 2.5 million of the fund reserve for those capital projects.
And there have been a handful of modest reductions. The recorder down 3 staff next year, and we're appreciative of that, and leaving those positions open. The treasurer is down 1 staff next year. So there have been some reductions.
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of other increased revenues and some reduction in expense.
But in total, it's 800,000.
To cover the supplementals.
Right.
And finance, we're gonna look at which supplementals, so we're not likely to increase our whole general fund by the 800 million, that's the total ask. Or are we then gonna look through at finance next week, what would not approve then out of these supplementals?
So the one side of your supplementals, the smaller one, is general fund only.
Right.
So the totals of those are the 881.
Right.
So that's where we came up with the recommendation for the general fund.
Of 0.8?
Yes.
Right. So next week, when we're looking at maybe only doing 0.7, we're then going to decide at finance what's not being done?
There's some of them that we can shift to capital because they're one-time expenses.
If we had to.
So we could use the fund reserve for those as needed if they're approved.
Okay.
Ms. Greeno?
I just wanted to, I believe you said this, but I just wanted to verify. So the $3 million in the additional fuel tax revenue is already included in the other taxes for 2024?
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Okay, and have all associated COVID costs been removed from the 2024 budget regarding personnel being shifted or services provided related to COVID, which is now gone?
I don't know that we have any positions that are directly tied to COVID at this point.
Well, that's the question. Can we make sure by the finance committee that we know if
Can you
there's...
speak a little louder?
Yeah, can we make certain by the finance committee that we know that all associated COVID expenses have been removed from the budget for 2024?
We'll take a look at that, and I'll try and identify if there are any that are
Thank you.
related to COVID.
And then also regarding the Safety Act, there would be a decrease in cost for personnel and housing for people who had been detained on bail. Has that been shifted into
We have
balance the expenditures?
I made a veiled reference to unknown savings. There are fewer people being detained across the street today than there were 2 weeks ago. And that number is likely to continue to decline for a period of time. But there is a real suspicion that as we play this out over the next 3, 4, 6, 8 months, that the detention numbers begin to escalate again. So we have not made reductions in our headcount of corrections officers, and we've not dramatically changed our jail expenses at this point. Again, trying to be conservative and trying to prepare for the unknown. I don't think it would be responsible to make real reductions in corrections just now. I hope we can. And I hope at that 6-month point, it's apparent that we are going to be not averaging 200 across the street, but we're going to be averaging 140. And maybe at that point, we can talk, but it's too early. And I think we need to fully fund the corrections office.
And then, okay. I think for the committee meeting, it would be good to just know the percentage of property tax and interest income on the previous budgets for last couple of years, just curious.
Okay, yes.
Because with the increase in the interest, which has been significant, and then other taxes such as cannabis, I'd just like to see if there's been a shift in what the property taxes are supporting. Also, too, I just wanted to clarify, on the new growth only, that implies that there's no levy increase with new growth only scenario?
No, it's still a levy increase.
It's a levy increase because of the new growth, but it's not using any of the CPI that's available.
The total EAV grows, and it's spread across a larger number.
Okay.
Melissa had something to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the question because we do have COVID grants through the state, so that I can respond to your request.
That's a dollar in, dollar out. I'm talking about any.
Like in the general fund? There's no general funds, I don't think. I'll have to double check. But I want to understand your question better so that I can.
My question is if there's any personnel or expenditures related to COVID, and it's not related to a dollar in, dollar out grant, so it's costing the county money, have those been identified and pulled out? So that's the question going forward.
Just to be clear too, so the emergency declaration has ended, but we still are doing COVID-19 vaccinations.
So my question stands for the Finance Committee to see what those numbers are.
You want to understand, are there general fund dollars supporting positions that are supporting COVID?
I want to understand if there's anything in any part of our county budget related to personnel or services for COVID. Has it been identified? Is it something that would be going away? That's what I want to know.
That's non-grant related.
Right, non-grant related. Those are zero sum. They don't impact our budget. And then, since we're working on behalf of taxpayers of McHenry County, if you're an individual household and you have an increase in, inflation, you may have your real income in your household doesn't match all of these. You have to live within your means. And so I'm just looking for where, as a county, we're living within the means for our taxpayers. So just that we're mindful of this as we're going into this process. So.
Ms. Ness?
While I do appreciate the challenge of revenue to expenses, I believe that the allocation to the Mental Health Board is really a restoration of funds they lost in the past. So I don't really view that as an increase, though I do know it is an increase over the past few years. I do agree with Member Sager that this is a hard call, but the austerity and the balance that we have been able to maintain as a county, if I see this right, has really fallen on the backs of the uninsured and the underinsured in our county because they haven't been able to get adequate health care and they haven't been able to get support for their mental health care. And I think that's that will be something that I'm hoping our colleagues on the board will really be willing to take a good, strong look at. How do we close that gap? Suzanne Hoban put it so well. We should not be triaging this kind of very important care. So I look forward to the finance meeting and a really meaningful conversation about how we help the taxpayers in our community that are uninsured or woefully underinsured. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, can I just, so, am I supposed to use that now? Either one. Oh, so just, for your purpose, well, for the full board's purpose, but even if we were to take the maximum that we could, we still wouldn't be able to do the full 2.5 for mental health based on this slide. So, it's, you know, just as a starting point. So financially, we really can't do 2.5 even if we were to take the max. We could get close, but, and so, you know, really when you look at what was recommended versus taking the maximum, it all went into mental health. That's, I mean, there's a couple of little other ones, but yeah.
Yeah, I really do understand that, and I appreciate that. So, but I do think there's room to work forward on that, and that's all I'm saying. Otherwise, you know, Mike, I think you could just write a check out of your personal account to make up the difference.
That would be a reoccurring cost that might not be sustainable.
Mr. Reiner.
Thank you. Pete, maybe you'll be able to help me out, and thanks for the invite for the Finance Committee meeting. But I see that transportation is cost neutral, yet we did the motor fuel tax. So is it too soon for us to realize that revenue, that we're not taking a little less for transportation because how many million did we? About 3 million. We only needed 1.5 million to sustain. We were gonna build up their reserves. I appreciate that, but yet we're not realizing it here in our budget.
No, you're not realizing on a reduction.
Correct.
Of the highway levy. No, you're not. You know, the highway fund has been so depleted, and we were tasked with needing probably to take the levy from 9 million to 10.2 just to inch out the bare minimum of what we needed in terms of capital at MCDOT, and it wasn't really changing the trajectory of the highway fund. That it will change now, and if we're proposing to leave it at 9 million, and we're going to strengthen that fund over the next couple of years, and we'll see. You know, we may be able to, I don't know, Joe, cover your ears, we may be able to reduce the levy at some point, but not, I would not suggest it this year.
Could I just expand on that? So a couple years ago, they had a negative, well, 3 years ago, it was like 100,000 was their fund reserve. Then it was negative. Then they received $3 million transfer from the general fund, and that allowed them to end 2022 at 2.8. So without that 3 million, they still would have been negative. And so the 9 million was along with the $3 million transfer, but the 9 million was not for additional spending. It was to get the fund back to a 5-month reserve per policy. So what you saw, what was presented to transportation, their capital needs because of all the deferment was, I think, around 2.8 or 2.5. And so that was, the 1.2 comes from the utilization of fund balance that was presented. So it was spending into the 9 million, which we said was not for additional spending, but then saying we absolutely cannot spend the 9 million plus dip into their reserve that's just barely where it needs to be. So the 9 million needs to stay so we shifted the capital. So I think it will get healthy faster, but I think for this year, it should not be part of the conversation of moving it lower. Does that?
It helps me, and it helps me with my future decision on, you know, maxing out anything that we would dare ask for, you know, next week at finance, and I look forward to finance also. Thank you.
Mr. Kearns?
By the way, Ms. Wagner's light is on also, but her thing's not working, so.
And my board's not working.
Just to have you know that.
Apologize for that.
You can
So-
use mine if you want.
So, a couple things here. And I know on the transportation, I agree fully that we should not touch that this year. We've reduced it to make our numbers work with the passing of the tax, the motor fuel tax. But in our budget, they keep saying 1.2 million. It was really I believe it was 2.3 million, because we had been deferring equipment purchases for years, like the last 3 years. And each year that grows, that we did that would grow by probably, if we hadn't done anything this year, would probably grow to about 3.5 that we'd be short. So those numbers really change. There's something I want to point out about the mental health board request. And I do support giving the mental health board more money. And I've had some conversations, Mr. Baber talked about this, and I've had some conversations with them. And one of the comments was made that we've reduced the mental health board, those funds that have been, when the levies were done, that those funds have been reduced. And Pete, you can correct me, but the reduction came at the payoff of bonds around, was it 17 or 18 that we paid off that building? But it did not reduce the services that they were providing to the mental health board.
Yeah, I believe the same amount of dollars went to services, yes. Yeah,
Right.
you're right, it was, the debt payments went away.
The debt payments went away. That's why that was reduced. It was not reduced because of the services that were provided. And I'll have to tell you one thing, as this being the number one issue of this budget, I am totally disappointed that the executive director of the mental health board, when she saw that number, got up and left the room in a huff. I am totally disappointed. You folks out there who have been here and speaking to fight for that, she should have been here to answer my questions and everyone else's questions. And I am disappointed she got up and left. And so take what comes out of all these decisions, because you weren't here to answer our questions of where those expenses and what they would have been for. And I'm totally disappointed at that. So probably should have talked about that publicly, but I hope everybody else noticed that she got up and left. So, but she should have been the one to answer for us, because she's the one who's been pushing. She has been the one who's been pushing for the $2.5 million to her board members, to everybody else. She has been promoting this, telling everyone to come to these meetings. And yet, when we went to their meetings, a couple of us, we said, we said this, you can't come up and say you're gonna have $2.5 million because it hasn't passed the board's budget. And this is the time for that discussion to have happened for her, with her, and your finance meeting next week. And I really hope she comes to your finance meeting, so that those questions of where that additional funding will be going, not just say we have increased asks, but break it out a little bit stronger. So I'll leave that alone there. Historically, when we go to our levies, and I will agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Sager, the boards in the past have made a lot of reductions and taken a lot of hits over this. And one thing that we've always talked about, several of us have talked about, is the sustainability of reducing your levy over time. And one of the warnings that we've been giving is sometimes you reach a point that sustainability is no longer there. We're at that point this year. We are at that point. Sustainability, we can't sustain it. Now, I think the mental health board on the 500, I think it's 521,000, that number. I leave that to this board, up or down on that. And I think it was respectable to give them that much of an increase. That's higher than anyone else. That's a 16 point something % increase over last year's, when our other departments have also been very, very cooperative and work really hard and dig deep. So I give everybody in this staff, I give them all high praises here. In the past, I'm one of those on the night of the meeting who would say, let's go with the flat levy. I would say that. I'm not going to change off of what our recommendations are this year, because we have finally, for the first time ever, presented this budget in a way that everyone should be able to understand it, and given us the ability to ask questions. And I give you guys high praise for presenting it this way, this time. And now is the time to talk, folks. Next finance meeting is the time to talk, and for the public to come to that meeting also and talk about your needs and different things. So it is the time now. I will commit that I am not going to change what we recommend as a committee, and not as a committee, but as a board, to vary off of any one of these choices that we've been handed here today. And in between choice, if you do it beforehand, great, but I will not participate in it changing that night. I'll give you my commitment. Mike Scala will sit there and say, Jim, you son of a gun. He said it in the past, but I won't do it. But I know at the Mental Health Board, they actually have more funds the last several years since they've paid off those bonds. And the Senior Grant Service Commission has had less to pay, and it's been flat, I should say. They've had less every year, and to do with inflation and everything. So I can support the Senior Service Grant Commission increase, because they do deserve that. They can appropriate, they've been responsible. They don't give 100% ask to anybody who comes forward for money. I was on that commission for a while, and people have been told no. And people have been reduced, and reduced dramatically. One of the groups when I was on there got $1 million hit to them. Not $1 million, but to their ask, I should say, not to what we gave out, but to their ask. They had over $1 million for their ask, and they didn't get half of it, of what they asked. I don't remember the number, but it was considerably lower. So these are the things we've got to look at. And sustainability, guys, think about sustainability. The other important sheet in here is, and I will agree with Mr. Scala, is the ARPA funds after 2 years here. That's going to be a big hit, and that will not be sustainable if we don't do anything. If we don't do anything, that will not be sustainable. The folks that'll be sitting here in 2 or 3 years, be making a really hard decision if we don't do anything on that. So I agree with Mr. Scala, a little bit at a time to help us on that. We should move forward with something like that. My last question, or only question, I should say, is what choice of these decisions here, I know you recommended the 1.95, Pete. When it gets to the night of the budget, are any of those modifications going to be, will we be able to choose between the 1.95, a 2.5?
So process-wise, you're gonna, at finance, the finance committee is gonna ultimately come out with something. Whatever these scenarios are, it could be none of them, it could be one of them, it could be a modification of one of them, whatever it is, finance will take a vote, and when we have 4 votes or more to push something forward, that's what gets pushed forward to the committee of the whole. So I can't answer your question what that's gonna look like, because I don't really know.
One option.
It'll be one option that will come forward to the full board at the committee of the whole. At the committee of the whole, Carrie will have her computer, and if the discussion is, hey, this came out of finance, and a majority of the board, besides finance members, want something different, then we can make that modification. She can make the modification, y'all can see what it looks like, you know, and if that's ultimately what, at the committee of the whole majority says, you know, yes, this is better than what finance came up with, then that's what would get moved to the board meeting, where, you know, at the board meeting, you don't really take votes. It's strictly put on 30-day review at that point. It's up for review. So that's why I'm saying the finance committee is extremely important and the committee of the whole is extremely important, so that when we come time for Tuesday night, what gets put on review is whatever the outcome of those meetings are.
Great, and thank you. That is the right answer that I was looking for, is the committee of the whole prior to that 30-day review is the time to make our final changes that we would
Correct.
expect. So
We
still have one more bite at the apple of what comes out of committee, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there's always gonna be, and remember, every time we do the budget, I always read into the record some amendments to the 30-day review, because there's tweaked up or tweaked down a little bit, or perhaps there was a resolution that went through a committee that was passed that has to be added in. So those are all very minor tweaks to the budget, but yes, ultimately, that's what's on review. Would be my expectation that that's what the board passes.
Again, I thank you very much. I do appreciate all the work that everyone has put into this year's budget. It really, really is much more understanding, and it really actually is a utilization of this meeting for what it was meant to be a couple years ago when we proposed having this special meeting each year. This is how I had expected to see it in the past, and thank you very much. All I can say is now I think our board can fully understand what they're voting on in the end. Thank you.
Ms. Wegner?
Just use mine.
Okay. So, first, I want to say thank you to accounting. I know you guys have heard it from everybody, but thank you for all your hard work and the clear presentation. And I know the departments have done belt tightening in the past, especially 6 years ago, and I know it gets hard to tighten your belt every single year. So thank you for making those hard decisions. First, I want to talk about the Mental Health Board. I did email all of you the presentation they gave in Public Health last month, I think, when they gave their budget presentation. So take a look at that. And I know all of it is not probably as self-explanatory. So feel free, Lindsay, can you raise your hand? Is she out there? No, okay, sorry. Anyway, the Public Health Department, or I'm sorry, the Mental Health Department is there to answer questions. So if you guys don't understand the presentation that that I emailed, go ahead and call them or call Leo. I also want to just say that the $525,000 that's allocated in this budget is only an increase of 5.8%. So I'm not sure where 16% came from, but it's 5.8%. And I do have a question. So the bond amount that we were paying that's no longer being given, we no longer have to pay. Do you know how much that was every year? It was 200,000. Okay. And the budget was cut 500,000, right? Several years ago, something around there? Yeah, right. So the amount that was given back was more than the bond amount. So they actually gave more back. So they actually it's 300,000 more than their bond amount payment.
It was 450.
450.
Was what was cut. So you can see you went from 10.9 to 10.45.
Okay, so if their bond was 200,000, then
That'd
it's
be $250,000
250,000. Yeah,
difference.
okay. So their levy was decreased by $250,000, 250,000, okay. So I also want to say thank you for everybody who came up and spoke, because as I know Ms. Ness talked about this too, Suzanne Hoban came up and talked about triaging patients and making those hard choices. It's not fair for them who are helping those people directly to make those tough choices and not expect ourselves to make that tough choice. We have to do that. And I know there's a lot of scenarios. I know there's a lot of needs out there. And so we need to make sure that we are funding those needs. Those needs don't just come from the government services. They also come from the resident services and the people that need them, the uninsured, the underinsured, those that have addiction, that need addiction recovery. We've heard a lot about that. And we also know that our state's attorney is very involved in the addiction recovery environment around here. So we know that that's near and dear to our, and to state's attorney, to our government, specialty courts. Another point, our specialty courts and our police social work program are funded by grants from the Mental Health Board. So we have to be careful that they're both going to be asking for more money. Well, if we want to continue to fund the specialty courts and the social work program, then we do need to allocate money to the Mental Health Board. So I also want to say that I thank you, Melissa, and the Public Health Department. I do support what you do. We do need to remember that any money that we spend on COVID is actually more than offset by those ARPA dollars that we've gotten. We would not have gotten ARPA dollars if there wasn't COVID. Now, I'm not saying COVID was a good thing. I'm just saying that I assume that if we spend money on COVID, that can still be applied. Can that still be reimbursed with COVID expenses?
I think COVID expenses are, in terms of reimbursement, is pretty much exhausted. You know, there may be some trailer grants. And I would say, Melissa, you can check me on this, the lion's share of our response dollars from COVID came from the CARES dollars that were pre-American Rescue Plan.
Well, yeah, there's two.
We got $2.7 million in the spring of 20.
Correct.
And that was where we really were bearing a lot of new expenses. Tracy first.
Right, so we had CARES and then we have ARPA. Okay, so have I been rambling? I do have a couple questions. So when we look at the recommendation here, there's $350,000 that's taken from IMRF and put into Social Security. Just wondering if there's any other funds that we could take out of the IMRF fund.
So every year, part of our process is to look at not just the ask, the requests, but what are the fund balances and what can they sustain? So IMRF, the employer contribution rate has been declining. So that has a healthy fund reserve. So if you look, we took $350 out of IMRF and moved it down to Social Security, so that's the FICA. That fund is right at 5 months. So the challenge for the funds that are 100% funded by levy is they go 6 months without cash. So actually in May, the FICA fund ran out of money for payroll. So that's more just housekeeping. The IMRF fund is strong and FICA is strong as well, but just to prevent having to do interfund loans. But I would say taking more than $350 out of IMRF is not recommended.
Okay.
We might be able to do something in there next year. I mean, our IMRF rate is lower than it has been in my entire time here. The impact of pension reform in 2011 and creating a tier 1 and tier 2 in IMRF is really starting to take root. We now have more employees in tier 2 than we do in tier 1 statewide.
Okay.
But really, if you look at the levy history for IMRF, I think several years ago it was $7 million. So we move it down as appropriate, but keeping it 5.5 months, I think, is the reserve.
Okay, I just wanted to see if there was any extra dollars there. Also, the ROE lease that is currently be paying by ARPA, Is there any possibility that the state can help pay that, since the ROE is also part of the state?
No, that's our responsibility. I mean,
Okay.
where you choose to house the regional superintendent is your choice, but it is your responsibility. Now, Diana is starting to generate a little bit of revenue from her testing lab, just first couple of months, and we've been pleased with what we've seen. And she's committed to sharing some of that revenue with us in '24.
Okay, I assume that's not in the budget because we don't know how much.
It's
that
in the
would be.
budget.
Oh, it is, okay. All right,
I think $1,200 a month or something like that.
okay. And just one final question. So the suggested 1.95% increase, is that going to allow us to meet the needs, the future needs of those reoccurring expenses that are being offset by ARPA and any other? I know it's hard to look in the future, but I mean, I'm thinking of PTEL and the restrictions on PTEL. So do you think 1.95 is enough to help us fund in the future?
It's hard to crystal ball 3 years out because it's fiscal '27 that we will no longer be able to use any American Rescue Plan dollars. I am comfortable with 1.95% as allowing some growth. Yeah, every year is different, you know, every year is different. We don't know the full impact of safety and pretrial fairness yet. That's going to be a big thing next year. And what is going to happen with our detention responsibilities? We just don't know. But allowing for some growth, I think, is a positive step.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Von Bergen?
I'm going to say it again. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate the comprehensive scenarios that you guys have put forth. It makes it easier for all of us to understand. My question, I guess, is each year we seem to have a discussion about new growth and taking it, not taking it. And I was just hoping you could clarify how new growth impacts the calculation and how it impacts existing taxpayers.
There's two ways property tax levy increases. One is the new growth, and one is by the allowable inflationary decision that you guys made. New growth next year is projected to be $125 million of new equalized assessed valuation that gets factored. So there's $125 million more where we're going to apply our property tax rate on.
Yes, making the pie bigger.
So every year, everybody's property gets assessed a value, right? And so that value is the total pie, if you want to call it the total pie, right? And so rates are then generated by the different taxing bodies that apply to each homeowner's assessed value, which then generates your tax bill. So when it comes to new growth is the totality of all the new building that has gone on in the county for the past year.
Property didn't exist the previous tax year.
Well, it's not that it didn't exist, because you can still have a partial on new growth, but it's additional value that has been added.
That part, being assessor for 20 years, I understand what new growth is. But how is that impacting the existing taxpayer? Because we always have the argument of not taking new growth, and I just want everybody to understand.
Most year we have.
Well, so if we didn't take new growth, then theoretically, in a perfect idealized world where everything stayed constant, then a homeowner's tax bill would actually go down, because the EAV has grown and you're not charging any more, so theoretically that reduces it a little bit.
Less rate to generate
Correct.
the same amount of money.
Correct. So in a perfect world, on everyone's tax bill, if we didn't take new growth, their tax bill would go down slightly. And by taking new growth, if you only took new growth,
We
and
were the only taxing body.
well, again, this is, I'm saying we're a small portion, we're less than 10% of a person's tax bill, but in a perfect ideal world, if it was just us, if we were to take new growth, then theoretically, their tax bill would stay exactly the same as it did the year before. It wouldn't have gone down a little bit. And then any CPI that we take is added on top of that. So if we take any percent of CPI, now in a perfect world, their bill would go up by that percent.
Thank you. I think it's really important that kind of all of us understand how that works, because it does impact everybody when, we're talking about increasing the tax base and the pie that we're taking from. So, thank you.
Ms. Greeno.
Yes, thanks. There were a couple of things that I forgot before. I did want to say regarding Member Reinert's comment, I do agree that when we need to be presented with 2.8 million that's needed for Transportation Committee, just go ahead and present that rather than the 1.2 for clarification going forward. But also, Mr. Avalar gave us information that we can increase the sales tax that would go toward the mental health department, and can we please investigate that before the Finance Committee and what could be generated?
Yeah, we can look at that. A word of caution, Winnebago County was the reference. They do not pay RTA sales tax. And so we are starting from a higher point already, a half-cent higher already. There may be additional RTA sales tax on the horizon in the next year or so.
Fiscal cliff.
A cliff? Did you say cliff?
The fiscal cliff for the RTA. That's one of the options that they're looking at, is including the sales tax rate for the RTA.
Okay. I mean, it is use tax. Saves property tax owners, so we should look at it.
Mr. Reinert.
Thanks, Pete and Mike, and everything that y'all have done is just fantastic, and Carrie. I do appreciate it. But the one thing I guess I just want to remind everyone that, we're looking at $74 million. Actually, every taxing body in McHenry County is going to go after this pie, and it's all under the guise of inflation. Inflation's everywhere, and everybody's going to be asking for it. We're not the only increase. MCCD, they're going for the full 5% and asking for a referendum to buy more land and repair what they have existing. I know Crystal Lake, Algonquin, Lake in the Hills, in my area, they'll be going for whatever they can get to. So major tax increases are inevitable. And I hope, though, although these tough questions of taxing more and funding the people that need it the most are hard to ask for, they're also hard not to give to, but the taxpayer is going to be very well burdened next year as it is on their real estate taxes. And I hope we don't take more than what's recommended, because I think you've done a good job here. So that would be my only thing. I would like to just sober everybody up a little bit why we're saving everybody money and keeping our levy down. We're not the only ones that are going to be asking for money. Thanks.
Ms. Ness?
To be fair, Member Kearns mentioned that Ms. Rizzo left the room. We don't know why she left the room. So, but I do want to say that the board president from the 708 board, Connie Machini, is here. Their finance person, Melanie, is still here, and Carolyn Schofield, who is our liaison, is still here. So I don't want it to be on the record that the 708 board was not available for questions or not present. Thank you.
Mr. Sager?
Yes, thanks, Chairman. I just want to clarify a couple of things here. As we look at our projected fund balance for FY 2023. That's 71.6 million. Is that correct?
No, it's not, we have a typo. That's not a fund balance. That is the levy amount.
I missed that before we printed.
Okay. All right, can you tell me what our current fund balance is?
For the
Which
general.
fund?
General fund is the
general
one
fund.
that's relevant, most relevant.
General fund.
So the unrestricted reserve is, at the end of '22, was 52 million.
So 52.
7.5 months.
All right, so that's 7.5 months. And is the amount listed here under the expenditures by category, fund balance enhancement, is that the amount of money that we're looking to contribute to that fund balance?
So what you're looking at on the expenses are all the funds. And so if you look at each individual funds where they budgeted more revenue than expense, we balance it with the fund balance enhancement. So that can apply to multiple funds. I can send that to you if you want. The general fund actually has a utilization of fund balance.
We're hitting the general fund pretty hard, fund balance, to fund the capital program next year.
Oh, sorry, I just want to clarify, though, that the item listed here, fund balance enhancement, is not projected to go into the increase or to raise our fund balance of 52 million.
Correct. It's actually, we're budgeting the general fund to use some of that 52 million.
Okay, and that's accounted then in our
In revenue?
revenue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
It was early on when we talked about the strength of our fund balance and funding our capital plan without operating money. That's where we're going.
Right. And by our policy then, excuse me, we are, that's 7.5%, you indicated, right?
Months.
And is that by policy that we have, or do we have a policy of what percentage?
For years, it was 6 months, and that would help get us our AAA rating. When past board made the effort to do the 10% cut in property tax levy, I think I'm losing my mic. We changed that policy to 5 months and utilized some of that newfound fund balance to fund operations. And it was Jim at that point was saying it was not sustainable. And, you know, we found other ways to get by, to be sure. Obviously, we've seen the fund balance grow now again, and we need to utilize some of it, but we want to tie it to one-time expenses.
Understood. I think that's a great philosophy that was stated, I think, by the chairman before, that, you know, you can't use reserves for ongoing projects. You have to look at one-time types of expenditures. And I appreciate that. You have to have a revenue source for ongoing.
And I think 5 months would make her very nervous, frankly. We can't quite do 5 months. We need to do a little bit better than that with the general fund.
Well, and I think the general fund had strong reserves, in part because of some of the ARPA influence. And that's why we keep bringing it up as.
The interest.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean,
and then just regular.
There's a lot of negative things about ARPA and COVID and all that, but to get that amount of money in from the federal government coupled with a spike in interest rates has been a unique situation.
Right. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Seeing no further comment, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Ms. Greeno, seconded by Mr. Shorten. All in favor, say aye.
Thank you.